The morning sun cast long shadows across the manicured gardens of Clarence House as Charles sat in his private study, reading the morning papers. The headlines were brutal, as they often were when it came to his family. But today, something was different. Today, the target wasn't him or his past mistakes. It was Kate, his beloved daughter-in-law, and the attacks felt particularly vicious. Charles had always admired Kate's grace under pressure. From the moment William brought her home, nervous and fidgeting with her handbag, Charles saw something special in the young woman from Berkshire. She had a warmth that reminded him of his mother in her younger days, but with a modern strength that impressed him deeply. The phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. It was William, and his voice carried a weight that made Charles's stomach tighten. "Father, we need to talk," William said without his usual pleasantries. "It's about Kate. The press is getting worse. And now there are rumors spreading within the family itself. Someone is feeding them information, personal things that only we would know." Charles felt his jaw clench. He had suspected this for months. The carefully timed leaks, the inside knowledge that appeared in certain newspapers, the way some stories seemed designed specifically to undermine Kate's confidence. It all pointed to someone with access to their private family moments. "Come over for lunch," Charles said. "We'll discuss this properly." After hanging up, Charles walked to the window overlooking the garden, where Camilla was tending to her roses. She looked peaceful, content even. But Charles had learned over the years that appearances could be deceiving, especially when it came to palace politics. When William arrived, his usually composed demeanor was cracked. Dark circles under his eyes suggested sleepless nights, and his normally perfect posture was slouched with worry. "She cried herself to sleep last night," William said without preamble as he settled into the leather chair across from his father. "Kate tried to hide it, but I heard her. The latest article about her failing as a mother because she uses a nanny, it was too specific, too cruel. It mentioned things about our private conversations. Dad, things only family members would know." Charles poured 2 glasses of whiskey despite the early hour. Some conversations required liquid courage. "Tell me exactly what was in the article," Charles said, his voice steady but his eyes blazing with a fury William had rarely seen. William pulled out his phone and began reading excerpts. With each word, Charles felt his anger building. The article didn't just criticize Kate's parenting choices. It mocked her background, questioned her intelligence, and painted her as a social climber who was failing to live up to royal standards. But worst of all, it included details about a private family dinner where Kate had confided her struggles with postpartum depression after Charlotte's birth. "Only 5 people were at that dinner," William said, his voice barely above a whisper. "You, me, Kate, Harry, and Camilla." The silence that followed was deafening. Charles felt something shift inside him, a protective instinct he hadn't felt this strongly since his boys were small and dealing with the aftermath of Diana's death. "I've been watching this pattern for months," Charles admitted. "The timing of these articles, the sources they claim, it's always a senior royal source or someone close to the family. I had my suspicions, but I hoped I was wrong." William leaned forward, his hands clasped tightly. "What are we going to do? Kate is talking about stepping back from royal duties. She thinks maybe if she's less visible, the attacks will stop, but we both know they won't. They'll just change tactics." Charles stood and began pacing, a habit he'd developed during times of deep stress. His mind was racing through possibilities, consequences, and the delicate balance of family relationships that had taken years to build. "Your stepmother has never been comfortable with Kate's popularity," Charles said carefully. "She's mentioned it several times. How the press and public seem to gravitate toward Kate during joint appearances." "You think Camilla is behind this?" William asked, though his tone suggested he'd already reached the same conclusion. "I think," Charles said slowly, "that we need to set a trap. Something that will give us proof one way or another." They spent the next hour crafting a plan. Charles would share a piece of false information with Camilla during their private dinner that evening. Something believable, but completely fabricated about Kate's upcoming schedule. If that information appeared in the press within the next few days, they would have their answer. As William prepared to leave, he turned back to his father. What if you're wrong? What if it's not her? Charles looked at his eldest son with eyes that had seen decades of palace intrigue and family betrayal. Then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But William, if I'm right, if Camilla is the source of these leaks, I want you to know that I will handle it. Kate is family now, and no one, no matter who they are, gets to torment my family. That evening, Charles sat across from Camilla at their intimate dining table, the one they used for private dinners when it was just the two of them. The conversation flowed naturally from his day's meetings to upcoming royal engagements. And then, as planned, he steered it toward Kate. Poor Kate has been struggling lately, he said, cutting his lamb carefully. She's been talking about taking on that new patronage, the one for children's mental health. But between you and me, she's worried about the additional scrutiny it might bring. She's planning to announce it next Thursday, at a private event in Surrey. Camilla's fork paused halfway to her mouth, just for a second, but Charles caught it. Oh. Really? I thought she was stepping back from new commitments. That's what makes this so interesting, Charles continued, watching his wife's face carefully. She feels this cause is too important to ignore, despite her personal concerns. She mentioned to William that she's willing to face whatever criticism comes because helping these children matters more than her comfort. The conversation moved on to other topics. But Charles noticed how Camilla seemed distracted for the rest of the evening. She kept checking her phone, something she rarely did during their private dinners. 3 days later, Charles was having his morning coffee when his private secretary burst into his study with unusual urgency. "Sir, you need to see this immediately," the secretary said, laying the morning edition of a particular tabloid on Charles's desk. There, in bold headlines, was the story. Princess plans mental health announcement, despite family concerns. The article contained every detail Charles had shared with Camilla, down to the location in Surrey, and Kate's supposed internal struggle with the decision. Charles felt something cold settle in his chest. The woman he had married, the woman he had fought public opinion to be with, had betrayed his daughter-in-law's trust and privacy for what? Jealousy? Spite? A misguided attempt to control the narrative around the royal family? He called William immediately. "We have our answer." "I saw the article," William said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "What now?" "Now," Charles said, his voice carrying a steel that surprised even him. "I have a conversation with my wife. And William, after today, things are going to change. Kate deserves better than this, and she's going to get it." As Charles prepared for what would undoubtedly be one of the most difficult conversations of his marriage, he thought about Kate, probably at home with the children, unaware that the mystery of her tormentor had finally been solved. He thought about the tears William described, the sleepless nights, and the way Kate's natural joy had been dimmed by months of calculated cruelty. The phone rang again. This time it was Kate herself. "Charles," she said, and he could hear the strain in her voice, even as she tried to sound cheerful. "I just wanted to thank you for listening to William yesterday. It means so much to know we have your support." "Kate," Charles said, his voice gentler than it had been all morning, "you will always have my support. You're my daughter now, and I protect my children, always." There was a pause, and when Kate spoke again, her voice was thick with emotion. "I've been wondering what I did wrong. You know? What made someone in our own family want to hurt me like this?" Charles felt his heart break a little. "You did nothing wrong, my dear. Nothing at all. But I promise you this, the person responsible will face consequences for their actions." After hanging up, Charles sat in the silence of his study, feeling the weight of what he had to do. His marriage to Camilla had been hard-won, fought for against public opinion and family pressure. But his loyalty to Kate, to William, and to the principles of protecting family members from harm was stronger than any personal comfort. The afternoon sun was beginning to set when Camilla returned from her charity event, humming softly as she entered their private quarters. Charles was waiting for her in the sitting room, the morning's newspaper folded neatly on the coffee table between them. Darling, you look serious, Camilla said, settling into her favorite chair. Rough day? You could say that, Charles replied, his voice carefully neutral. Camilla, we need to talk about Kate. Something flickered across Camilla's face. Surprise, wariness, or perhaps calculation. What about Kate? Charles picked up the newspaper and set it on the table where she could see the headline. This story. It contains information I shared with you 3 nights ago. Information that was completely false. The color drained from Camilla's face, but she straightened her shoulders. I don't understand what you're implying, Charles. I'm not implying anything, Charles said quietly. I'm stating a fact. You are the source of the leaks that have been tormenting Kate for months. You have betrayed the trust of our family and caused genuine pain to someone I consider my daughter. The silence that followed was broken only by the ticking of the antique clock on the mantelpiece. Camilla's hands, usually so steady, trembled slightly as she reached for her water glass. You don't understand the pressure I'm under, she finally said, her voice barely audible. Every public appearance, every photograph. The comparison is always there. Camilla looks tired while Kate glows. The future queen outshines the current queen consort. Do you have any idea what that feels like? Charles felt a complex mix of emotions, disappointment, anger, but also a deep sadness for the woman he loved, who had allowed her insecurities to drive her to such betrayal. So, you decided to destroy her? He asked. To use your access to our private family moments to feed gossip columnists and tabloid reporters? To make a young mother cry herself to sleep while worrying about her children reading these lies about her someday? Camilla's composure finally cracked. I never meant for it to go this far. It started with just small things, little corrections to stories that made me look bad in comparison. But then they wanted more, and the money was good, and… Money? Charles's voice was deadly quiet. You were paid for these betrayals? The admission hung between them like a physical presence. Camilla had not just betrayed Kate out of jealousy or insecurity. She had profited from it. Charles stood slowly, feeling every one of his years. Pack a bag, Camilla. Tonight, you'll be staying in the guest quarters. Tomorrow, we'll discuss the terms of your immediate departure from all royal duties and residences. Charles, please, Camilla said, rising from her chair. It was a mistake. A terrible mistake. I can make it right. I can stop the stories. I can. The only thing you can do now, Charles said, his voice carrying a finality that made Camilla step back, is leave my family alone. You've done enough damage. As Camilla left the room to pack, Charles called William again. It's done, he said simply. How did she react? She confessed. It was worse than we thought. She was being paid for the information. William was quiet for a long moment. Kate needs to know it's over. I'll tell her tomorrow, in person. She deserves to hear it directly from me. And she deserves an apology from this family for not protecting her sooner. That night, Charles sat alone in his study, looking out at the garden where Camilla had tended her roses that morning. The woman who had shared his bed, his confidences, and his life for so many years had systematically betrayed the most vulnerable member of their family. But as the moon rose over the ancient walls of Clarence House, Charles felt something he hadn't experienced in months, a sense of peace. Tomorrow, he would begin the process of making things right. Kate would know she was safe. William could stop worrying about protecting his wife from unknown enemies. And the royal family could begin to heal from this betrayal. The phone beside him chimed with a text message from William. Kate's sleeping peacefully tonight. First time in weeks. Thank you, Dad. Charles smiled for the first time all day. Sometimes, doing the right thing required sacrifice. Sometimes, protecting the people you love meant disappointing others. But as he prepared for bed in a house that felt different without Camilla's presence, Charles knew he had made the only choice his conscience would allow. Kate was family, and family meant everything. The next morning arrived with an unusual quietness at Clarence House. Charles woke alone for the first time in years, the empty space beside him serving as a stark reminder of the previous evening's confrontation. He dressed carefully, choosing his navy suit, the one Kate had once complimented as bringing out his eyes. Today would require all his strength and diplomatic skills. At breakfast, Charles's private secretary, James, approached with visible nervousness. "Sir, there are several messages from the Queen Consort's private secretary. Apparently, she's requesting an audience with you before any final decisions are made." Charles looked up from his untouched eggs Benedict. "What sort of messages?" "She's claiming there are circumstances you don't understand, sir. She says the situation is more complicated than it appears. And she has information that would change your perspective." Charles set down his fork with deliberate precision. "James, schedule a meeting for 10 o'clock in my office. But first, I want you to call William and ask him to bring Kate here at noon. It's time she knew the truth. And I want to tell her personally." By 9:30, Charles could hear Camilla's voice echoing through the corridors as she arrived. Even from his office, he could detect the desperation in her tone as she spoke to the staff. When James announced her arrival, Charles steeled himself for what he knew would be an unpleasant conversation. Camilla entered wearing a cream-colored dress that Charles recognized as one of her favorites, a calculated choice designed to remind him of happier times. Her eyes were red-rimmed, suggesting a sleepless night, but her posture remained defiant. "Charles, darling, thank goodness you're willing to hear me out," she began, settling into the chair across from his desk without invitation. "I've been up all night thinking about yesterday, and I realize I didn't explain things properly." Charles remained standing, his hands clasped behind his back. "I'm listening. You have to understand. This whole situation with the press wasn't my idea initially," Camilla said, leaning forward earnestly. "About 6 months ago, that dreadful reporter, Marcus Pemberton, approached me at a charity function. He said he already had sources feeding him information about Kate, and he was going to publish stories with or without my input. He suggested that if I occasionally provided context, I could help ensure the stories were more balanced." Charles raised an eyebrow. "Context? Yes, I thought I was protecting her, in a way. When they were going to run that awful story about her supposedly having a meltdown at Charlotte's school, I gave them information about how difficult it really is to manage royal duties with young children. I thought it would make people more sympathetic." The explanation sounded rehearsed, and Charles's expression didn't soften. "And the money, Camilla? How does payment factor into this protective narrative?" Camilla's composure faltered slightly. "They insisted on paying me. I didn't ask for it. But Pemberton said it made their arrangement more professional. I donated most of it to charity, Charles. You can check the records." "Most of it?" "Well, I kept some for personal expenses. Things that I didn't want to burden you with. Little gifts for the grandchildren. Donations to causes you might not approve of. I thought of it as my own pocket money." Charles walked to the window, looking out at the garden where Camilla's roses still bloomed, seemingly unaware of the drama unfolding inside. "Camilla, even if I believed your explanation, which I find difficult to do, you still betrayed Kate's privacy. You shared intimate details about her struggles, her fears, her private moments with our family. But Charles, you don't see what I see." Camilla's voice rose with frustration. "Kate gets all the attention, all the praise. Do you know what it's like to walk into a room and watch everyone's face light up when they see her, then barely acknowledge me? I'm your wife, but I'm treated like an afterthought next to your precious daughter-in-law." The venom in her voice when she said precious daughter-in-law revealed the depth of resentment that Charles had failed to recognize. He turned back to face her, seeing clearly for the first time the woman he had married. "So this was about jealousy after all," he said quietly. "Not protection, not being cornered by reporters, but simple jealousy of a young woman who has never been anything but respectful and kind to you." Camilla stood abruptly, her carefully constructed explanation crumbling. "You're damn right it was about jealousy. Do you have any idea what it feels like to be compared to Diana every single day, and now to Kate too? Perfect Diana, beloved Diana. And now perfect Kate, with her perfect family and perfect smile. Where does that leave me, Charles? What am I supposed to be in this family? Charles felt a profound sadness wash over him. You were supposed to be my wife, a grandmother to my grandchildren, a senior member of this family. But instead, you chose to be Kate's tormentor. The office door opened suddenly, and James appeared with obvious discomfort. Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but Prince William and the Princess of Wales have arrived early. They're in the blue drawing room. Charles checked his watch. It was only 11:15. Thank you, James. Please offer them tea and tell them I'll be with them shortly. As the door closed, Camilla grabbed Charles's arm. Please, don't let Kate know about my arrangement with the press. It will destroy any chance of repairing our relationship. I can make this right, Charles. I can find a way to make it up to her. Charles gently but firmly removed her hand from his arm. Camilla. Kate deserves to know who has been causing her pain. She deserves to understand why she's been questioning herself and her place in this family. I won't lie to her to protect your feelings. But our marriage, Charles. What about us? Charles looked at the woman he had loved for decades, the woman he had waited years to marry, and felt something break inside him. You destroyed us the moment you decided to profit from Kate's pain. Some betrayals are simply unforgivable. Camilla's face went white. You can't mean that. Charles, I love you. If you loved me, Charles said with devastating quiet, you wouldn't have tortured my son's wife. You wouldn't have made my grandchildren's mother cry herself to sleep. You wouldn't have turned our family's private moments into tabloid fodder. The sound of laughter drifted up from the drawing room below. Kate's laughter. Bright and genuine. It was a sound Charles realized he hadn't heard in their home for months. Camilla heard it too, and her expression hardened. Fine, if you're choosing her over me, if you're willing to destroy our marriage for your perfect daughter-in-law, then you're a fool, Charles. She's just a commoner who got lucky. She'll never be royal in the way that matters. Charles felt his last bit of affection for Camilla evaporate. Get out of my house, Camilla. Pack your things and leave today. I'll have my lawyers contact yours about the divorce proceedings. 10. W. Divorce? Camilla staggered as if he'd struck her. Charles, you can't divorce me. Think of the scandal. Think of the church. Think of your position. I'm thinking of my family, Charles replied. The family you've spent months systematically attacking. The choice is quite simple, actually. As Camilla left his office, Charles could hear her heels clicking frantically down the corridor. He took a moment to compose himself before heading downstairs to see William and Kate. In the blue drawing room, he found William pacing nervously, while Kate sat on the sofa, looking elegant but tired in a simple blue dress. She stood when Charles entered, offering him a warm smile that made his heart ache for all she had endured. Charles, thank you for seeing us, Kate said, moving to kiss his cheek. William said you had news about the press situation. Charles gestured for them both to sit, then took the chair across from them. Kate, my dear, I have something difficult to tell you, but I want you to know first that it's over. The person who has been feeding information to the press has been identified and will no longer be a problem. Kate's eyes widened with hope. Really? Who was it? Charles looked at his son, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Kate. It was Camilla. She has been selling stories about you to a tabloid reporter for the past 6 months. The color drained from Kate's face. She sat in stunned silence for several moments, processing the information. Camilla? But she's family. Why would she want to hurt me? William reached over and took Kate's hand. From what Dad learned, it seems to have been motivated by jealousy and resentment over the positive attention you receive. Kate shook her head in disbelief. But I've tried so hard to be respectful to her, to support her in her role. I thought we were getting along well. At Charlotte's birthday party, she was so kind, talking about how much she enjoyed our family dinners, which she was then reporting to journalists, Charles said gently. Kate, this betrayal says nothing about you and everything about her. You have been nothing but gracious and welcoming to Camilla since the day you joined our family. Tears began forming in Kate's eyes. All those stories about my parenting, about my background, about my supposed failures as a royal, they came from someone at our own dinner table? Charles felt his anger surge again as he watched Kate's pain. Yes, and I am profoundly sorry that it took me so long to identify the source. You should never have had to endure months of this treatment. Kate was quiet for a long moment, staring at her hands folded in her lap. When she looked up, her eyes held a mixture of hurt and relief. At least now I know I wasn't going crazy. I kept wondering what I had done wrong, what I could change about myself to make the attacks stop. You did nothing wrong, Charles said firmly. Nothing at all. And I want you to know that Camilla will face consequences for her actions. She's been asked to leave Clarence's house today, and divorce proceedings will be initiated immediately. Kate gasped. Charles, no. You can't divorce her because of me. The scandal, the implications for your reign. Kate, Charles interrupted, you are not responsible for my marriage ending. Camilla is. Her choices led to this moment, not yours. William squeezed Kate's hand. Dad's right, love. This isn't about you. It's about someone who betrayed our entire family's trust. But the children, Kate continued, her voice breaking slightly. What will we tell George and Charlotte about why Grandma Camilla isn't at family gatherings anymore? Charles was struck by Kate's immediate concern for his grandchildren, even in the midst of learning about Camilla's betrayal. It reinforced everything he admired about the young woman who had married his son. We'll tell them an age-appropriate version of the truth, Charles said. That sometimes adults make choices that hurt family members, and there are consequences for those choices. But we'll also make sure they understand that this situation has nothing to do with them or anything they did wrong. As they continued talking, Charles heard a commotion in the hallway, raised voices, and what sounded like items being dropped. A moment later, James appeared in the doorway looking flustered. Sir, I apologize for the interruption, but the Queen Consort is requesting to speak with you and the Prince and Princess of Wales together. She's quite insistent. I'm an ado. Charles stood. Where is she now? In the main hall, sir. She has her luggage with her, but she's refusing to leave until she's had what she calls a proper conversation with everyone. Kate looked at William with worry. Maybe we should hear what she has to say? Charles shook his head. You don't owe her anything, Kate. You don't need to subject yourself to whatever manipulation she's planning. But before they could decide, they heard Camilla's voice echoing through the house, calling Charles's name with increasing urgency. The sound grew closer, until she appeared in the doorway despite James's obvious attempts to stop her. Camilla looked disheveled, her carefully styled hair now messy and her makeup streaked. She took in the scene, Charles standing protectively near Kate, William's arm around his wife's shoulders, and the obvious intimacy of their family discussion. How touching, Camilla said with bitter sarcasm. The perfect royal family, having their perfect little meeting while casting out the wicked stepmother. Camilla, you were asked to leave, Charles said firmly. This conversation is private. Private? Like all those private family dinners I wasn't supposed to discuss? Like all those private moments I was supposed to keep secret while watching St. Kate be celebrated for breathing? Kate stood slowly, her composure remarkable given the circumstances. Camilla, I don't understand why you dislike me so much. I've tried to be respectful, to support you. Support me? Camilla laughed harshly. Do you know what your support looks like to me? It looks like pity from someone who has everything handed to her on a silver platter. Perfect husband, perfect children, perfect public image. Do you have any idea what it's like to be constantly compared to you and found lacking? I never asked for comparisons, Kate said quietly. I've tried to stay out of the spotlight, to focus on my work and my family, and that's exactly the problem. Camilla's voice rose to a near shout. You don't even have to try. You just exist, and everyone adores you. Do you know how hard I've worked for every bit of respect I've earned? How many years I've spent proving myself worthy of being Charles's wife, and then you waltz in and effortlessly become the star of the family. William stood, his protective instincts clearly activated. That's enough, Camilla. Your jealousy doesn't justify what you've done to Kate. Jealousy? Camilla turned her fury on William. Is that what you think this is? This is about survival, William. In this family, if you're not relevant, you're nothing. I was trying to maintain my position, to have some control over the narrative about my own life. Charles stepped between Camilla and his family. By destroying Kate's reputation and peace of mind? By profiting from her private struggles? There was nothing noble about your actions, Camilla. Noble? Camilla's laugh was bitter. Nothing about this family is noble anymore. You're all just playing parts for the public while scheming behind closed doors. At least I was honest about my motivations. The room fell silent except for the sound of Camilla's heavy breathing. Kate moved slightly forward, and Charles was amazed by her courage in addressing the woman who had tormented her. Camilla, Kate said softly, I'm sorry you felt threatened by me. That was never my intention, but what you did to me, to my family, to my children who will someday read these stories about their mother, that was cruel. And I can't forgive it just because you felt insecure. Camilla stared at Kate for a long moment, and Charles thought he saw something flicker across her face, perhaps regret or recognition of the pain she had caused. But then her expression hardened again. You'll never understand what it's like to be me in this family, Camilla said finally. None of you will. You've all made your choice about who matters more. I hope you're happy with the consequences. As Camilla turned to leave, she paused at the doorway. Charles, when this all comes out, and it will come out, remember that I tried to protect this family's reputation. Kate might be your darling now, but the press will eventually turn on her too. They always do. And when that happens, you'll wish you had someone who understood how to manage them. With that, she was gone, her heels clicking down the marble hallway until the front door slammed with finality. The three remaining family members stood in silence for several moments. Finally, Kate sank back onto the sofa, the emotional toll of the confrontation evident on her face. Well, she said with a shaky laugh, that was intense. Charles sat beside her and took her hand in both of his. Kate, I want you to know that Camilla will never have access to our family's private moments again. You're safe now. I know, Kate said, squeezing his hand. And Charles, thank you for believing me, for investigating, for caring enough to do something about it. I was starting to think I was paranoid, seeing enemies where there weren't any. You were never paranoid, William said, settling on Kate's other side. You were being systematically attacked by someone you trusted. That's not your fault. As the afternoon sun streamed through the windows of the blue drawing room, Charles looked at his son and daughter-in-law and felt a profound sense of peace. The betrayal had been painful, the confrontation difficult, but his family was intact and stronger than before. So what happens now? Kate asked. Charles smiled at her, thinking of the woman who had just left his house forever. And the woman who remained, kind, resilient, and surrounded by people who would protect her. Now, he said, we move forward. Together. Outside, they could hear a car starting and driving away from Clarence's house. Camilla was truly gone. And for the first time in months, Kate felt like she could breathe freely in what had become her second home. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of possibility, healing, and the quiet strength of a family that had chosen love over loyalty to someone who had betrayed them all. 3 months had passed since Camilla's explosive departure from Clarence's house, and the royal family was still adjusting to their new reality. The divorce proceedings had been swift and decisive. Charles's lawyers had presented evidence of Camilla's betrayal, including financial records of payments from tabloid newspapers. The settlement was generous but final, with strict confidentiality clauses that prevented Camilla from speaking publicly about her time as queen consort. Kate stood in the nursery at Kensington Palace, holding baby Louis, while Charlotte played quietly with her dolls nearby. The press attention had indeed shifted after Camilla's exit became public knowledge, but surprisingly, it had turned more positive. The royal family's official statement about irreconcilable differences leading to the dissolution of the marriage had been accompanied by increased public appearances from Charles, William, and Kate together, showing a united family front. "Mama, why doesn't Grandmama Camilla come to Sunday lunch anymore?" Charlotte asked, looking up from her tea party setup. Kate had been dreading this question, though she and William had prepared for it. Sometimes grown-ups make choices that hurt other people's feelings. "Sweetheart, when that happens, they might not be able to spend time together anymore until they can make things right." "Did she hurt your feelings?" Kate knelt down to Charlotte's level, choosing her words carefully. "Yes, she did. But you know what? Sometimes when people hurt us, we learn that we're stronger than we thought, and we also learn who really cares about us." Charlotte nodded solemnly, then brightened. "Like how Grandpapa Charles always brings us special biscuits and reads us extra stories now." "Exactly like that." Kate smiled, thinking of how Charles had thrown himself into being a more present grandfather since Camilla's departure. Without the tension of managing his wife's feelings about Kate's popularity, he had become more relaxed and affectionate with all of them. The sound of William's key in the door interrupted her thoughts. He appeared in the nursery doorway, still in his RAF uniform, looking tired but pleased to be home. "How are my favorite people?" he asked, scooping Charlotte up for a hug while kissing Kate's cheek. "Mama was telling me about grown-ups making bad choices," Charlotte announced importantly. William raised an eyebrow at Kate, who shrugged. She asked about Camilla. "Ah," William said, setting Charlotte down. "Well, sometimes that happens, doesn't it? But the important thing is that we learn from those experiences and make sure we treat each other with kindness." As they settled into their evening routine, Kate's phone buzzed with a message from Charles. "Dinner tomorrow night?" "Just family. I have some news to share." The next evening found them in the small dining room at Clarence's house. The intimate space that had once felt tense with Camilla's presence now felt warm and welcoming. Charles had hired a new chef, a cheerful woman named Mrs. Patterson, who specialized in comfort food rather than the elaborate French cuisine Camilla had preferred. "The lamb is delicious," Kate said, meaning it. The atmosphere at family dinners had transformed completely without Camilla's critical commentary and passive-aggressive observations. "Mrs. Patterson is a treasure," Charles agreed. "She actually asks about the children's preferences. George told her he likes his carrots. Not too mushy. And she's been making them perfectly ever since." "Speaking of the children," William said, "George asked me yesterday why Grandpapa seems happier lately. I told him that sometimes changes that seem difficult at first can lead to better things." Charles set down his fork and looked at both of them seriously. "That's actually part of what I wanted to discuss tonight. I've been doing a great deal of thinking about the past few months, about what happened with Camilla, and about what I want for the future of our family." Kate felt a flutter of nervousness. Change had become synonymous with anxiety in her mind. Even positive change. "First," Charles continued, "I want to apologize again for not recognizing what was happening sooner. Kate, you suffered for months while I was blind to what was going on in my own household. That's unacceptable, and I'm sorry." "Charles, you don't need to keep apologizing," Kate said gently. "It's over now." "No, I do need to apologize. Because I've realized that my failure to protect you from Camilla was part of a larger pattern. I've spent so much of my life trying to manage other people's feelings about my choices that I lost sight of what really matters. The well-being of my family." William leaned forward with interest. "What do you mean?" Charles stood and walked to the sideboard, returning with a bottle of champagne that Kate hadn't noticed before. "I mean that I've decided to make some significant changes that will ensure nothing like this ever happens again." As he opened the champagne, Charles continued, "I've been working with constitutional lawyers for the past month on a new approach to the monarchy. One that puts the core family unit at the center of everything we do. William, I'm moving up the timeline for your increased responsibilities. And Kate, I'm creating a new role specifically for you." Kate nearly choked on her wine. "A new role? The Princess of Wales has always been an important title. But I want to make it a formal position with specific duties and protections. You'll become the official family liaison for the monarchy. Essentially, you'll be responsible for managing how we present ourselves as a family unit and protecting family members from exactly the kind of attack you endured. William was staring at his father in amazement. You're essentially making Kate the gatekeeper for family privacy and public image. Among other things, yes. She'll have her own staff, her own budget, and most importantly, the authority to cut off access to family events and information for anyone who proves untrustworthy, regardless of their relationship to me or their position in the family. Kate set down her champagne glass with trembling hands. Charles, I don't know if I'm qualified for something like that. I'm still learning how to be royal myself. Kate, Charles said, returning to his seat and looking at her with deep sincerity. You've shown more dignity and grace under attack than most people show under normal circumstances. You've managed to maintain your kindness and integrity while being systematically undermined by someone who should have been supporting you. If that doesn't qualify you to protect this family, I don't know what would. Besides, William added with a smile, you've already been doing the job informally. Remember how you handled the situation with Harry's wedding when the press was trying to create drama between you and Meghan? You quietly coordinated behind the scenes to make sure everything went smoothly without any public recognition. Kate remembered that week, the careful phone calls, the diplomatic meetings, the way she had managed to navigate competing egos and media pressure to ensure Harry's wedding day was perfect. She had done it instinctively, without thinking of it as a formal role. There's more, Charles said, refilling their glasses. I'm also announcing my engagement. Kate and William stared at him in shock. Engagement? William managed. Charles laughed at their expressions. Not a romantic engagement, a civic one. I'm formally announcing my partnership with the Kate Middleton Foundation for Children's Wellness. Kate blinked in confusion. But Charles, I don't have a foundation. That doesn't exist. It will by next month. I'm providing the initial funding, £5 million to start, and you'll have complete autonomy over its mission and activities. Think of it as your platform for all the work you're passionate about, without having to navigate existing royal charities that might have competing interests. The room fell silent as Kate processed this information. Charles was essentially offering her independence, resources, and protection all at once. After months of feeling vulnerable and attacked, the idea of having her own professional identity and authority felt overwhelming. Why? She asked finally. Why are you doing all this? Charles reached across the table and took her hand. Because, my dear girl, watching what Camilla did to you made me realize that we've been approaching royal duty all wrong. We've been so focused on tradition and protocol that we've forgotten the most important thing: taking care of each other. Your mother, he continued, his voice growing softer, used to say that the monarchy's greatest strength was its ability to evolve. She believed that each generation should make the institution better than they found it. I failed to do that in my marriage to Camilla. I let tradition and the desire to avoid scandal override my responsibility to protect my family. William cleared his throat, visibly emotional. Dad, you did protect us. When it mattered most, you chose us over her, but it shouldn't have taken months of torture for Kate before I acted. It shouldn't have required detective work to figure out that someone in our inner circle was betraying us. Moving forward, we're going to have clear boundaries and consequences, and Kate is going to have the power to enforce them. Kate felt tears welling up in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Charles said simply. Say you'll help me build something better for George, Charlotte, and Louis. Say you'll use your natural wisdom and kindness to make sure no future member of this family ever feels isolated and attacked the way you did. Kate looked at William, who nodded encouragingly, then back at Charles. What about public opinion? What about people who think I'm already too influential? Who say I'm changing the monarchy too much? Charles's expression hardened slightly. Let me worry about public opinion. Anyone who thinks protecting family members from betrayal is too much change isn't someone whose opinion I value. And besides, William added, the public adores you. The approval ratings for the royal family have actually gone up since Camilla left. People respect that Dad chose family over politics. That night, as Kate and William drove back to Kensington Palace, they sat in comfortable silence, processing the evening's revelations. Finally, Kate spoke. "It feels like a dream, doesn't it? 3 months ago, I was crying myself to sleep because I thought I was failing as a royal. Now Charles is essentially asking me to help redesign how the whole family works." William reached over and squeezed her hand. "You deserve it, love. Every bit of responsibility he's offering you. Every bit of recognition. You've earned it. What if I mess it up? What if I make decisions that hurt the family in ways I don't anticipate?" William was quiet for a moment, considering. "Do you remember what you said to me on our wedding day? When I told you I was terrified of disappointing everyone?" Kate smiled at the memory. "I said that as long as we make decisions based on love and respect for each other, we couldn't go too wrong." "Exactly. And Kate, if there's one thing the past few months have shown, it's that you have an incredible instinct for what's right for this family. Trust that instinct." 2 weeks later, Kate stood in the garden at Clarence house, watching George and Charlotte play with their grandfather. The official announcements had been made. Her new role, the foundation, and the structural changes to royal family operations. The response had been overwhelmingly positive, with royal commentators praising Charles's innovative approach to family-centered monarchy. "Mama, look," Charlotte called out, pointing to a butterfly that had landed on Charles's shoulder. "It likes Grandpapa." Kate laughed, pulling out her phone to capture the moment. These were the kinds of memories she wanted to preserve and protect. Simple, joyful family moments, without the shadow of betrayal or manipulation. Her phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. For a moment, her stomach clenched with the old anxiety. Would the attack start again? But when she read the message, she was surprised to find it was from Marcus Pemberton, the journalist who had been Camilla's contact. "Your Royal Highness, I wanted you to know that I deeply regret my role in the pain caused to you and your family. I've left tabloid journalism and am now working for a children's literacy charity. What happened was wrong, and I wanted you to know that your dignity throughout that ordeal was inspiring. M. Pemberton." Kate stared at the message for a long moment, then deleted it without responding. She had learned that some chapters of life were meant to be closed completely, without the need for further communication or closure. "Everything all right?" William asked, approaching with Louis in his arms. "Everything's perfect," Kate said, meaning it completely for the first time in months. As the afternoon sun began to set over the gardens of Clarence house, Kate reflected on how dramatically their lives had changed. Camilla's betrayal had been devastating, but it had also revealed the true strength of their family bonds. Charles had chosen love over loyalty to someone who had hurt them. William had stood by her throughout the crisis, and together they had created something new and better from the wreckage of betrayal. The children's laughter echoed across the garden as Charles chased them around the rose bushes, the same rose bushes Camilla had once tended while plotting Kate's downfall. Now those flowers bloomed in a space filled with genuine love and trust, a fitting metaphor for how beauty could grow from places where ugliness had once taken root. Kate's phone rang, and she saw it was her mother. "Hello, Mum. Darling, I just saw the news about your foundation. I'm so proud of you. Your father and I always knew you had it in you to make a real difference. Thank you, Mum. I feel like I'm finally finding my place in all of this. You know," her mother continued, "when you first started dating William, I worried that royal life might change who you are at heart. But watching how you've handled everything, especially these past few months, I can see that you've stayed true to yourself while making the royal family better. That takes real strength." After hanging up, Kate rejoined her family in the garden. Charles was now sitting on a bench with all 3 children clustered around him, telling them a story about a brave princess who saved her kingdom through kindness and wisdom. "And did the princess live happily ever after?" Charlotte asked. Charles looked over at Kate with a smile. "She did indeed, sweetheart. Because she learned that the most powerful magic of all is a family that loves and protects each other." As the stars began to appear in the evening sky, Kate realized that Charles was right. They had found their happy ending, not in the absence of conflict, but in their commitment to choosing each other over those who would hurt them. The silence that had followed Camilla's screams of protest had indeed been powerful. But it wasn't empty. It was full of love, trust, and the quiet certainty that some bonds are strong enough to withstand any betrayal. Kate Catherine Middleton, Princess of Wales, family protector and foundation founder, was finally exactly where she belonged,